In 1964, an organization known as Genentech would create the deadliest virus known to man, red light. Decades later, in 2009, under the orders from Blackwatch, Dr. Alex Mercer would use his virus to genetically engineer a new virus that surpassed its destructive properties, which would then be dubbed Blacklight. Shortly after the virus's creation, Dr. Mercer's team would be killed off, and knowing he would be next, Alex took a sample of the virus and fled, but would be cornered in Penn Station. With no other option, Mercer smashed open the vial and unleashed the virus just before he was gunned down. The Blacklight virus would then break down and reconstruct Alex's body, and through the body, the virus would again gain consciousness and would wake up in a morgue. Without any memories, the virus would believe itself to be Mercer and would flee, eventually finding its way to Alex's sister, Dana, who would inform the virus that Elizabeth Green would become a carrier for the original red light strand. Upon meeting Green, she would break free, telling Alex that, in a way, she was his mother. Alex would then track down an old lover of Mercer's, Karen Parker, and would work with her to find out more about the outbreak, but would ultimately be betrayed and led into a trap set by Karen and a specialist. And to make things even worse, Dana would then be kidnapped by one of Green's hunters, and Alex would be forced to rescue her before the same specialist would contact Alex, and with his information would be able to kill Elizabeth and find out the truth. The two would then uncover a plot to nuke New York, and together they would assassinate a general before the specialist would reveal himself to be an infected, and would fight with Alex, believing that if he consumed Alex, he would become all powerful. But Alex would ultimately be victorious, decapitating the Supreme Hunter. Alex would then pilot a helicopter and would take the nuke out to sea where it would detonate. Alex would then return to the city to deal with any remaining Blackwatch or Blacklight presence. However, eventually Alex would completely lose faith in humanity, growing to see them as weak, and eventually decided that humanity was too far gone to save, and he would start manipulating the virus even further, eventually releasing it once again back into New York. Now working to infiltrate Blackwatch and Genentech through proxies, Alex would take an interest in a man named James Heller after watching him kill a brawler with only a knife. Alex, seeing potential in Heller, would then infect him. This would horribly backfire, as James had his own goal of avenging his wife and daughter, whom Alex had gotten killed by unleashing the virus. James would then confront Alex, who had discovered and kidnapped his daughter Amaya, to lure James out, and eventually the two would face off, with James being victorious and would consume Alex, ending his plans for good. Very little is known about Cole's early life before the events of Empire City. After dropping out of college, mainly to piss off his parents, he'd take a job as a bike messenger. One day, while delivering a package, he'd get a call from a man named Kessler, offering him more money to open up the package. Opening it and finding a strange device that would then go off, destroying everything in a 6-block radius, but leaving Cole alive in a coma. When he awoke a couple of weeks later, he would discover that he had gained the ability to channel electricity and would battle the gangs of Empire City, but along the way would learn about and meet a man named Kessler, who seemed to be behind everything and did everything he could to push Cole. From convincing his best friend Zeke to join him for a chance of power, to forcing Cole to choose between saving a group of doctors or his girlfriend Trish. Choosing to save Trish, Cole would be shocked when he discovered that Kessler had known what Cole would plan to do, and had placed Trish with the doctors. She would then fall to her death, with Cole attempting to revive her, but only managing to get her conscious for a few seconds. In her final moments, Trish would tell Cole that she had despised him for his selfish actions, and for wasting his powers being so cruel. After this, Cole would be contacted by Kessler, who would meet him at the same spot the race fear had originally gone off, and the two would fight to the death, with Cole finally defeating Kessler. However, the man wasn't dead yet, and using the last of his energy would show Cole a vision revealing that Kessler was in fact a version of Cole from an alternate future who had traveled back in time after his family had been killed by a powerful conduit known as the Beast, and had come back to mold Cole into the man he couldn't be. Now knowing what was at stake, Cole would vow to destroy the Beast. Months later, Cole would be contacted by the NSA agent Lucy Quo, who was aware of the Beast and wanted to help, by introducing Cole to a Dr. Sebastian Wolf, who had apparently worked with Kessler in the past. Right as Cole, Zeke, and Lucy were leaving Empire City, however, the Beast would appear, and while Cole would do everything he could to defeat the Beast, he would fail and Empire City would be destroyed. Now, more determined than ever to defeat the Beast, Cole would go to the city of New Marais, where he would find and meet Dr. Wolf, who would tell him about a device called the RFI, which Cole was told would drain the Beast's power. However, Cole would face several setbacks, having to deal with a militia, ice conduits, monsters, the death of Dr. Wolf, as well as a plague that was quickly spreading throughout the city, killing many people. However, eventually, thanks to his old and new allies, Cole was able to get the RFI ready, but not before the Beast found its way to New Marais, however, revealing itself to be an old ally of Cole's, John White, who planned to save humanity from the plague by turning as many humans into conduits as possible, as they were immune to the plague. However, there was another way. By using the RFI, Cole could cure the plague, however, at the cost of his own life as well as all conduit lives on Earth. Not willing to sacrifice himself, and possibly not even believing that the RFI would work, Cole and Lucy would side with John, laying waste to New Marais, destroying his former allies who had tried to stop him, eventually killing his conduit ally Nyx, and right after this, he would be face to face with Zeke, who would take one last stand against his friend, forcing Cole to put him down. Now, with all obstacles gone, Cole would destroy the RFI, but John would reveal that he was tired of the destruction and wants to finally die. However, still believing in their plan, John would grant Cole the power, transforming him into the Beast. Now, having the power for himself, Cole would move throughout the country, activating as many conduits as possible, bringing about a new age of humanity. Hello and welcome everyone to a very special match to start off Season 3, as I will be tackling one of the most popular gaming matches of the 7th generation of gaming consoles, where I will be pitting Alex Mercer from the Prototype games up against Cole McGrath from the Infamous games, but with a twist, as rather than pitting Alex against the canon version of Cole, just like in Delsin vs. James, I will be using the evil version of Cole. Honestly, I didn't feel that even in the second game that the fight would be a fair matchup. So, why not use the powered up version of Cole in order to hopefully even out the playing field? Now, to get a couple of things out of the way before I get into this match, first off, I will not be including Cole's amp in this match for two reasons. The first being that there really wouldn't be a reason to include a whole weapons category, as Cole is the only one bringing a weapon to this fight. And he, in fact, discarded the amp after the destruction of New Marais. Also, as there is some crossover between the two versions of Cole and combat abilities, I will be reusing some of footage from my Cole vs. Wesker video, as that information would not change between the two versions. Also, as there is some crossover between the two versions of Cole in physical and combat abilities, I will be reusing some footage from my Cole vs. Wesker video, as that information would not change between the two versions. Finally, I will be sticking exclusively to the games for both of these characters, meaning I will not be including the tie-in comics for either one. Right, with all that, let's start by comparing these two physically. Physically, the virus most commonly takes the form of Dr. Alex Mercer, who was a 29-year-old human standing at 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 190 pounds. However, thanks to the virus's ability to alter its physical properties, its height and weight are dependent on how it uses and how much biomass it currently has. Alex is an incredibly strong opponent, being able to punch, rip, and cut apart both humans and other infected with ease. He is strong enough to lift and throw cars with little to no difficulty very long distances. With a single arm casually through most of a tank, could match James Heller, who is capable of similar strength, and even managed to rip apart a Goliath infected. However, Alex is not all powerful and has been shown to be overpowered by other infected, namely the Supreme Hunter and James Heller. When it comes to movement speed, Alex is much faster than a normal human, being capable of running so fast he can run up the side of a building. In terms of combat speed, he's shown to be a match for James Heller, who could react to and counter rockets. As a polymorphic lump of biomass in the shape of a human, Alex doesn't really have a limit to his stamina like you or I would. However, his abilities do seem to diminish as he takes more damage, meaning that he does have a theoretical stamina limit. It simply doesn't work in the same way you or I would think of it. Alex has an amazing healing factor, capable of repairing Alex from having the majority of his body destroyed by a nuke and only needing to absorb a crow to fully regenerate. However, should Alex run out of biomass and be unable to acquire more, his healing factor will run out and leave him vulnerable. Though this would require dealing out a massive amount of damage, it is theoretically possible. At the time of his death, Cole was a 27-year-old conduit standing at 6 feet even and weighing 180 pounds. Even before awakening to his conduit abilities, Cole was in excellent physical shape, having taken part in urban exploration and parkour for fun. After the blast and awakening to his powers, his physical abilities were all enhanced, putting him well above human limits in these areas. However, as the focus of these games are more on the powers, Cole's physical abilities don't receive many examples of his strength. But we do get enough, such as when he dented a metal locker, easily lifted metal debris over his head, and even held open a devourer's mouth, to show that his strength at least was greatly increased. His speed was similarly enhanced, easily having a faster running speed compared to normal humans, can react to and counter other conduits in combat, and was fast enough to react to and then redirect rockets. He could continue fighting for a period of at least 12 hours as he would operate in the Empire City in New Moraes from the time he woke up to when he went to sleep. Cole was also made incredibly durable, being able to shrug off machine gun fire and even high caliber weapons for a short time. He can survive being in close range to a mortar round and direct hits from several rocket launchers, as well as taking hits from titans like Devourers, Ice Titans, and even survived his fights with the Beast. Both Alex and Cole were enhanced to superhuman levels, both easily surpassing a normal human, but at the same time, it's easy to tell that one's enhancements are superior to the others. Starting with strength, while Cole holding open the mouth of a Devourer is impressive, it simply doesn't compare to Alex's single-hand casual throwing of an M1 Abrams, which would put him above this even if it was only part of one, as a fully intact M1 Abrams can weigh anywhere from 60 to 75 tons. Speed is actually the closest and is in fact even, as by scaling to James Heller, Alex should be capable of reacting to rockets just like Cole. As Alex doesn't have an actual stamina limit and Cole does, he gets this by default, at least in the way we conventionally understand stamina. Durability is pretty messy, as on paper it should be clear cut, as Cole after becoming the Beast should scale to John White, who tanked a nuke, and Alex, being on the outskirts of one and in the protection of a helicopter, was blown to pieces. But it's really not that simple. When John White tanked a nuke, he did so in his lava avatar form, not his base form, which likely protects him from damage, letting him take hits from Cole's storm. So this probably doesn't reflect how much damage a nuke would really dish out to Cole, especially considering that he has been shown to be hurt by bullets and stunned by rockets. So while I'll say they're even in raw durability, I'm still giving this to Alex for his superior regeneration overall. At the end of the day, Cole simply can't hold his own against Alex's enhancements. With the exception of speed, there really isn't much to say. Alex clearly has the edge in physical abilities. As a shapeshifter, Alex has several powers that he can switch to at will for any situation. His first ability is the power to absorb any biological creature, granting him their shape as well as their memories. However, when it comes to powerful beings like the Infected, they must first be weakened before he can perform this. The first of his polymorphic abilities are his claws, which can rip through people with no issue and has the ability to generate a giant spike under a target, inflicting massive damage or ripping his opponent apart. His Hammer Fist forms his fist into large metal balls capable of destroying tanks in just a few blows. He can also use them to throw himself large distances using momentum. Whip Fist turns his arm into an extendable whip-like weapon that can rip through multiple opponents at once, or be used to snatch opponents closer from a distance, similar to Scorpion's Rope Spear. Or it can be used as a grapple hook, bringing himself closer to an object he wishes to use. Muscle Mass increases his strength to the point where he can rip a person in two or even lift more than usual. His blade is his most powerful weapon, capable of cutting through tanks and special infected alike, giving it the power of the Hammer Fist but the speed of the claws. His shield creates a shield made of biomass that can protect him from some damage but will eventually break and will need to reform. His armor is basically a more sturdy version of the shield that doesn't break but does slow him down significantly, covering his entire body in a material that I believe is similar to chitin, the material arthropods' exoskeletons are made of. After consuming Elizabeth Green, Alex gained the ability to act as a hive mind for the infected, letting him control the lesser infected types and have them act how he sees fit. When consuming more biomass than necessary, Alex gains the ability to expel that biomass in the form of a Devastator attack. His first Devastator involves him shooting out a massive amount of tendrils in all directions. His second Devastator is more or less the same, but with the tendrils being focused in one direction. His final Devastator takes the form of massive spikes that erupt from the ground. Just like his good counterpart, Cole has a high variety of abilities, allowing him to swap between whatever he needs to in the moment. To go over the abilities Cole maintains through both versions, he will still have access to his electrokinesis and electromagnetism, including his electric bolts, which are simple lightning bolts fired from his hand, electric grenades, which thanks to his evil karma burst into a large collection of smaller grenades. He can fire rockets to blow his opponents away. He can fire a shockwave that throws targets into the air, slowing them down, giving him time to shoot them. By charging up a specific part of his brain, Cole's perception of time was slowed, letting him hit targets that would normally be too fast for him to get a clear shot at. Not just limited to offense, Cole could also use his powers for mobility, being able to supercharge cars before jumping off to get a higher elevation. His static thrusters allowed him to hover in the air. He could heal himself by draining electricity from an object or person, restrain, heal, or even drain a person of their bioelectricity, killing them instantly. And finally, he could make a tether to bring himself to a further off location or pull his opponents to himself. He can even summon lightning down from the sky or create tornadoes with electromagnetism. Speaking of electromagnetism, this ability gave him the power to throw and lift metallic objects as projectiles, and fusing them with electricity, giving them more force to hit with. After using the power transfer device with Nyx, Cole gained the ability to use napalm powers, mostly manifesting in variations of powers he had already had. The napalm blast fires a cloud of ash at his opponents, stunning them and allowing him to get in other attacks. The napalm grenade will explode on impact, and the rockets fire in a burst of 5, creating multiple explosions. The Firebird Strike allows Cole to fly for a short distance. The Ionic Drain will drain all opponents around him in a radius, instantly killing them. And finally, he can summon a group of Spiker enemies to fight alongside him. After inheriting John's powers, Cole became the very thing he swore to destroy in the Beast, gaining his powers and abilities as well. Cole gained the ability of pyrokinesis, allowing him to use and manipulate fire. He could also create a giant lava version of himself, protecting his true body, and gain the ability to use other magma attacks. His most powerful ability was the power to create an explosion similar to a ray sphere blast, but more powerful, destroying Empire City in one explosion, while awakening any and all conduits in the area. Alright, this is actually a very difficult comparison, as both use their powers for different approaches, with Cole being ranged and Alex being close quarters. So the answer we need to ask is, could Alex consistently use his powers to get close enough to Cole in order to force a close quarters fight? And the honest answer is simply no. Right off the bat, Cole has an advantage due to the nature of his powers being ranged attacks in comparison to Alex's close range powers, as well as having a larger variety. For all of Alex's powers, Cole has more than one perfect to answer it with, and one that will hit much harder. Speaking of, there's also the really big issue of firepower. While Alex can slice through and throw tanks, Cole can decimate entire cities. So that's not exactly even either. There's also the nature of how Cole's lightning would affect Alex, as even if hypothetically he could dodge or even react to Cole's lightning, it would be pointless as all of Alex's defenses are comprised of his biomass, which would allow the shock to transfer throughout his body as though his defenses weren't there. Now, while to be fair, this is exclusive to Cole's lightning-based abilities, once Cole realizes this, he's going to capitalize on it. And speaking of, I am aware that it has been said by one of the developers that Alex has a weakness to electricity. However, I share 3 Topics Gamer's point of view that this isn't a lethal weakness to electricity. Rather, my viewing of this is that due to the nature of electricity, Alex's body doesn't resist it in the same way it would, say, a bullet or blunt force. Now, there is Alex's ability to summon infected, such as Hydras or Goliath, or even lesser infected, which could prove trouble for Cole. However, Cole has answers to all of these, with his Magma Avatar or Ionic Tornado, and the Drain, or in the worst case scenario, Cole could just nuke the area around them, with his Ray Sphere Blast, which should be equivalent to John's, which destroyed Empire City. That basically leaves Alex's last option as stealth. And unfortunately, Cole has an answer to that, being given the power specifically by John White to let him see into people and detect viruses in their bodies. And considering this is evil Cole we're talking about, draining a group of civilians to get to Alex wouldn't faze Cole in the slightest. This really isn't an even category. Cole not only has Alex beat in terms of range and firepower, but in variety of abilities as well, giving him the edge in special abilities. Like in all of my matchups, I will be using lightsaber Star Wars fighting forms to better and more easily describe how both of these opponents approach combat with their particular styles. Now, with that out of the way, let's begin. Honestly, it's impossible to say for certain just how many fighting styles Alex knows or has even mastered, as he's consumed countless soldiers and civilians alike. In terms of using his shape-shifting abilities, Alex takes a simple approach of simply ripping apart his opponents rather than implementing any kind of skill or techniques aside from very basic ones. In theory, Alex should be a master tactician, as all the soldiers and higher-up military officials he's absorbed should give him intimate knowledge of military combat tactics as well as counter-tactics. With his powers, Alex has shown skilled and diverse use of shape-shifting abilities, using his powers to exploit the different strengths and weaknesses of his opponents, from the brute force of his hammer fists to the fast-paced claws, or even utilizing his shape-shifting on the fly, in order to stealthily infiltrate his enemy's facilities. Before the events of Infamous 1, Cole had little to no combat experience. However, throughout the events of both games, developed his own unique combat style as he battled the various gangs of Empire City and New Marais. As a melee fighter, Cole could best be described as a brawler, using heavy power-based strikes to beat down his opponent with a combat style that I would compare to a novice use of Form 4 variation Gemso. As while he has the basics of heavy hitting down, the more complex uses like counterattacking, deflection, and footwork aren't things he's demonstrated. And now, while I believe these are things Cole could be capable of improving on given time, or if there was a need to improve during his lifetime, he'd be better, but by the time of his canon death, this had not happened. However, his ranged combat style is much more tactical, as his wide range of abilities allows for far more experimentation against enemies. Cole's typical approach against enemies was to start off by progressively throwing his abilities until finding a weakness that he could exploit and spamming it. Or, if there was no obvious weakness, throwing down with his most powerful abilities until his target was taken out. His skill set also allowed him to more easily get into advantageous positions in combat, such as elevated positions or more dense cover, allowing him to switch up from a defensive position to an offensive position whenever he pleased, allowing him to control the pace of a fight. Right off the bat, it's clear to see that there are some key differences between these two as fighters that will play a big role in the outcome. Starting with close-range combat, Alex has the edge for two distinct regions. The first being all the soldiers he's consumed, giving him a mastery of several martial arts. And second, Cole shifted his melee focus to weapons-based contract when he was given the AMP, meaning his hand-to-hand skill has likely gotten rusty by the game's end, and upon leaving New Marais, he left the AMP behind. While Alex would overall have more experience, it's unfortunately the wrong type of experience to use against Cole. Fighting the soldiers and Blackwatch wouldn't prepare Alex against a conduit, and Blackwatch soldiers are trained to fight infected. Meanwhile, Cole would be a little better prepared for Alex, as battling several different conduits over his career would better prepare him against opponents with different power sets, as well as teaching him to expect the unexpected when facing a new opponent, while Alex is more accustomed to battling those with his power set. On paper, Alex should be a master tactician with centuries of combined combat experience to pull from, but by the events of Prototype 2, Alex had grown cocky, as shown when, despite James defying him by killing Dr. Koenig, he spared him. When confronting James a second time, Alex went right to consuming him, despite the fact that James was still at full strength and able to resist. And in their third and final encounter, Alex's primary method of fighting was to use brute strength against a man who at this point was rivaling him, not even bothering to use his full set of powers. While in comparison, Cole has less to draw from his tactics, but while not revolutionary by any means, along with his wider variety of powers, means that he's gonna have an easier time switching things up against and reacting to Alex's tactics, as well as changing up the fight on Alex. Overall, while Alex would without a doubt be the better hand-to-hand fighter, Cole's main skills and tactics revolve around ranged combat, something Alex, while also experienced in, doesn't have the tools necessary to compete with, and even if he were to find the weapons necessary, they'd be little more than a nuisance to Cole. And so, I grant Cole the edge in combat skills and tactics. Let's set up this fight. Let's say that it takes place in New York Zero right after the events of Infamous 2, but right before the events of Prototype 2. Alex surveyed the wreckage of the ACP, feeling rather bored. He wondered why humans struggled the way they did. Infection winning was inevitable. The higher-ups at Gentek had to know this. Maybe they were just delaying the inevitable. Humanity was good at that, after all. Much like how that human behind him had stayed alive so long in such a hazardous area. He turned and stared at the man incredulously, wondering what had to be wrong with someone to be here willing. Bit of a bad area for urban exploration, don't you think? He said, more curious to pick this one's brain. Physically if need be, but taking out Blackwatch had become monotonous, and this was a nice change of pace. Cole merely cracked his knuckles and got closer. Nah, I think I'm exactly where I want to be. You're Mercer, right? Oh, great. Another savior type. Alex wondered what this one's story was. Perhaps a dead family. That was a popular motivation for the Jarheads. That was a popular enough motivation for the Jarheads to rush at him. Almost as though they hadn't just seen him tear a tank apart with his bare hands. Regardless, he had already lost interest in this human. He quite literally had a million better things to do. I don't have time for this. As he turned to leave, Alex felt a hand grab his wrist and immediately would turn and uppercut the conduit, sending him flying into some debris. Now, Alex knew something was off about this guy. Most people would have just lost their head at best and at worst turned into mush. But this man, besides looking a little stunned, seemed fine. Cole, for his part, rubbed his chin before getting back up and saying, "Okay, you want to play that game?" And then, using his electromagnetism to lift the metal debris around him into the air. "Let's play." Alex immediately forms his shield as Cole sends broken bits of rebar at him, the shield protecting him for the most part, but one piece lodging into his leg. Alex lowered the shield, forming his claws, and ripped the metal out with a growl. Alex leapt at him, only to be hit with a shockwave in midair. He was able to land without issue, but was immediately hit by a bolt of lightning. Stumbling back, but catching himself and stabbing into the ground. Cole can feel the ground shake under him and flips back just in time to avoid the giant spike erupting from the ground. As the spike retracts, Alex again moves in, swiping away with his claws, grazing Cole's body as he backs up into a wall. Alex moves in to gut Cole, but the conduit moves out of the way while throwing a cluster of grenades at Alex that would stick to him. Alex is so preoccupied trying to remove the balls of lightning that he doesn't see Cole tether himself to a nearby building before the bombs go off. Alex is, for lack of a better word, blown apart by the cluster still attached to him, missing his arms, a good chunk of his torso and face, but quickly regenerates and begins looking around for his opponent. He wouldn't be waiting long, as Cole would fire a Hellfire missile at him, alerting Alex, who reacts just in time to see the rocket and forms his shield, deflecting the missile away. Alex quickly forms a whip fist and throws it at Cole. He misses but pulls himself to the building. Cole evades and fires another rocket this time, hitting him point blank in the face. Watching the smoke clear, only to be taken off guard when Alex bursts through and grabs him, dragging Cole's face across the building as he runs along its side. Upon reaching the end, Alex would leap up before slamming Cole down to the street. The beast would groan as Alex stands up, now forming his hammer fist and raising them to crush when the conduit suddenly bursts into flight, tackling Alex and reversing their positions. Cole tries to grab down and drain Alex. However, the second Alex has a grip on Cole, it's becoming clear that he's not going to be able to overpower him. That was the least of his worries, however, as Alex once again had him in his grasp and was now starting to bend Cole's arms slowly, seeming to deliberately take as much time as possible in order to prolong the pain. And here I thought you were going to be a problem. Turns out you're just another piece of human trash. In response to the virus's taunts, Cole's eyes started to burn a deep red, and before Alex can act, a shockwave throws him into a car, denting it. As Alex stands, he can feel the power radiating off of Cole. In response, Alex sends out a pheromone that lures in the infected from the area around. A pack of brawlers closes in, one leaping at Cole before getting reduced to ash by a powered-up bolt. Another two charge in at the same time, but are thrown away by a shockwave. Alex uses this as a cover and leaps back in with his arm now changed to his blade. Cole fires another bolt, taking off Alex's human arm, but he doesn't even react, and Cole moves out of the way just in time to avoid being bisected, but still receives a deep cut to his side before Alex spins around and delivers a kick to Cole's chest, breaking several ribs. Alex stands by and watches as more infected start to swarm Cole. However, before they can dig into him, a sphere of red energy pulses from him as energy flows from the infected into Cole as he drains the monsters surrounding him before standing back up. Cole wastes no time and forms his magma avatar. Alex, thinking fast, starts summoning all of the infected from the red zone as brawlers, juggernauts, and even a Goliath swarm the area. Cole swats away the smaller infected, however, leaves himself open to a sucker punch by the Goliath, knocking him into a building. Alex, seeing a chance, takes it and jumps up, using his blade to cut into Cole's eye. Knowing that he needs to focus on Mercer, Cole sends out a massive fire shockwave, incinerating everything in the area. Alex, at the last second, throws up his armor, allowing him to tank the blast. Cole, seeing this upon exiting his lava avatar, immediately throws another cluster of grenades at Alex. However, this time, they have no effect, and Alex continues his attack. But having slowed himself down with the armor, Cole has enough time to pull out his ionic tornado. Alex would stab his tendrils into the concrete below him and holds on for dear life as the tornado pulls him at high velocity. As soon as the wind slows, he prepares to attack, but is suddenly hit by a crimson bolt striking his entire body and burning a chunk off of the armor. Alex, having taken a severe amount of damage, feels that his healing factor is starting to slow down, and in a last-ditch effort, summons as much extra biomass as he can and expels it in every direction, throwing tendrils everywhere. Cole is thrown back from the shockwave and flies through a wall. Alex, taking advantage of Cole's stunned state, quickly consumes all of the dead infected in the area, quickly replenishing his biomass, now for overloading and needing to extend his limbs, and forms an extra long blade and denser armor. As Cole steps out, he sees Alex eyeing him up like a wild animal about to strike. I have to admit, you're impressive, but now I'm gonna take this seriously. Don't disappoint me, Alex says with a smile growing on his face under the armor. Cole, on the other hand, however, just cracks his stiff neck and starts to float into the air. No, I'm done. You know, next step. You're just another plague. Alex could feel the energy radiating off of Cole, and knowing that he has to end this, leaps at Cole to rip him apart. But it's already too late, and he, along with everything in a 6-block radius, is instantly vaporized. Cole levitates down and stands, surrounded by the rubble of New York Zero. Standing in the middle of a shattered remains of buildings, the ashes of his opponent blow away. Nearby, Cole sees a soldier rowing onto his side. He moves over and heals the newly awakened conduit, helping him to his feet, and they introduce each other. Cole and this James person would have a lot of work ahead of them after all. May as well be friendly. And with that, I declare Cole McGrath, the Beast, the winner. Okay, so I have no doubt in my mind that this result is going to be a tad controversial, but please just hear my reasoning first. So the physical department is fairly simple. While Cole tying for speed and durability, but even then, remember that Cole only reaches this level of durability in his lava avatar, not his base form, meaning that if Alex were to get a slash on it, it would still end Cole. Now, special abilities were oversimplified a little due to Cole's ability to wipe entire cities off the map, but even if you look at it without that, Cole would still have that category due to his versatility and ranged advantages. While Alex's tools are simple but effective, Cole overall would still be dealing more damage thanks to his ionic abilities. It's just, in that scenario, it's a little muddied by the fact that a single good hit from Alex would end the fight. Their strategy is a bit strange, as honestly, the main reason Cole gets this is due to Alex having grown too cocky between games. However, even if we used Prototype 1 Alex, this result wouldn't change, though it would be a lot closer. While Prototype 1 Alex was more strategic with his use of powers and skills, when looking at their approaches and skills, Cole would just be better equipped to fight Alex than the other way around. Now, there's just one key issue with all of what I just said. If Cole wasn't the Beast, he would still have all these pretty big advantages and would still lose. Because the second Alex got his hands on Cole, he would rip him to shreds. Cole would be able to evade for a time, don't get me wrong, but if your enemy can one-shot you, you need to be able to do the same to them. And thankfully for Cole in this matchup, I, in a misguided attempt to make this fight even, picked the one variation out of 5 possible versions that was capable of one-shotting Alex. The fact of the matter is that this fight would only last a few seconds, if that, just like Adelson vs. James. And just like in Adelson vs. James, the fight I described simply wouldn't happen. The unfortunate reality of this incredibly popular matchup is that almost no circumstances where it's even without equalizing or negating certain abilities. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Do you agree that Cole would destroy Alex as soon as he took him seriously? Do you agree that Cole's firepower is enough to put down this mad virus, or do you think that Alex would be able to get it that hit him before Cole took him seriously? Let me know in the comments down below. If I got anything wrong, please feel free to correct. Right, and before I go, as always, please subscribe to Winter Ghost and 3 Topics Gamer, both 2 amazing content creators. And me and Winter Ghost worked on a collab together hosted on his channel, which again is left in the description. Right, with all that, I've been Ray932, and I will see you next time.
Knock, knock, Puddin'. Say hello to your new, improved Harley Quinn.
Cinder. It's not often a single client brings me double the business.
Wait.